Hi there. Uh, in today's episode, we will continue building our application, the Code Manager application, the Wise Guy, right? So let's take a quick look at what we did in the previous episode. So, in the previous episode, what we did was we looked at the MVC design pattern, right, where we have models, views, and controllers, and so this is part of the MVC design pattern, MVC. But Rails has an extra component called the router, which routes the incoming requests to the right controller. Okay, and from there, the controller takes over and does the right thing based on the request. Okay, so we said the router is like the receptionist who sends us to the right person, and the controller is the guy who gets the request, uses the model, and renders a view and sends it back to the client, which would be the browser. Okay, so the browser, right? All right, so that's what we looked at. Now, we also have a small change. My internet connection is a bit slow, so I'm not going to use Cloud9. I'm going to use my local setup. But you guys can go ahead and continue using Cloud9 because that's a very simple setup. All right. So uh, now that we've reviewed the past episode, let's get back on track and see what we need to do. Okay. So if you look at our to-do list, we want the users to be able to add a quote, and we also in the previous episode said that a quote is gonna have some text. Okay. So let me just search for some quotes, and let's see. Um, so here it says life happens wherever you are, whether you make it or not. Nice. All right. So what I'm gonna do is what we're going to do is we're going to actually build the model now. Okay. So we're actually going to build the application now. Okay. So uh, to do that, before we do that, let's see what a model is. Okay. So now actually let's take a step back. Now, what we are doing is we are saying we are going to save all the codes. Okay, so we need to save the codes in some place, right? Because all right, so why do we need to save the codes? Because uh, we need to show it somewhere else, right? So let's think about this, right? In the real world, uh, if you want to store codes, right? So you can store it in your memory, right, in your brain, but you may forget it, right? So you may write it down in a book, right? So what you can do is you can note down the code in a book, right? And this is kind of permanent, right? So when you note it down on a book, you can go back and look at the book and see what's written, to remember what the code is, right? So similarly, computers and applications save their data in something called a database. Okay. Now, if you look at the name, it says it's a database. So it's also sometimes called data store because it stores the data. Okay, and the database which we are going to use is called PostgreSQL, right? And this is an open source database, and it allows us to store data, right? Okay, now very quickly, a database has the concept of tables or relations. Okay, now a table is something which can store a specific type of data. Okay, so you can think of it this way, right? So let's say you want to store uh, a student's marks for a class, right? So class 2, so we want to store the marks of students of class 2, right? Now, if you want to do it on a piece of paper, what do? You draw a table, right? You say, this is the student name, right? And these are the marks he got in maths, science, and social, okay? And then the student's name is Muju, his marks in maths are 80, uh, in science are 98, in social are 90. Okay, so these are the marks, and another guy, another girl's Zainab, right, has scored some other marks, right? So if you look at this data, um, it forms, this is called tabular representation of data. So this is called a table. So you may have seen tables like these in lots of places in books where you have names of cities and their temperatures or their maximum temperature, their minimum temperature, names of cities, their population, right? So this is called tabular representation of data. Now, databases also store data in a similar fashion. Okay, so a table has a name. So here we have a table called codes, and this table is going to have a few columns, right? So now these things are called columns, right? So name, maths, science, and social. Okay, so uh, the name of our table is going to be codes, and it's going to have an ID. So this is something which uniquely identifies a single code, and it's going to have the body of the code, and it's also going to have when we added. So it's also going to have a date time. So um, so this is as if we are saying, I'm writing this code, and uh, I'm writing this code at this particular time. Okay, so that when you go back and see, okay, this is the code, this is the text. I wrote it on November 23rd, 1989, whatever, right? So we also can store the time. So now for this, you don't really have to use a database. You can just store it in a file. And in fact, let's actually do that because we'll see that databases are not always the right solution, right? In this case, it actually makes sense, but let's actually see. So what we'll do here is we'll create a class called code.rb, and actually I'm gonna remove this. And so in the other episode we said Rails has a specific structure, right? So all the models, so anything which deals with data is called a model. Okay, so all the models go into the models folder. Okay, so here I'm going to create a file called code, and inside of this I'm gonna say this is a simple class. And all right, let's see it. All right, so you know what, hmm. All right, so should we go into these details? Let's actually do that very quickly because this is a good exercise. So code is going to have an instance method called so code is actually going to have a method called initialize, which is the constructor, and let's say this takes the body of the code. Okay, so this takes the body of the code and it stores it inside the code. And it also has a method called save. So you know what, we will look at all the details of Ruby maybe in a different course. For now, you have to know a bit of Ruby, or you can wait for my other course and look at those videos. All right, anyway, so here we have a class which has a constructor which takes some text and stores it inside an instance variable. And when we say save, what I want to do is I want to save this to a file. Okay, so in Ruby, I'm going to create an IRB console here, Rails console. All right, so in Ruby, if you want to write to a file, you can say file.write, and I'll just say foo, and this is awesome, right? Now, if you look at our files, we should have a file called foo with the text "this is awesome," right? Now, what I want to do is I want to append to this. So let's look at the documentation. Actually, that doesn't give me documentation. So file.write. Uh, this may not work. So I'll say file.open foo, and the mode is append, right? So this is our file, and I'm gonna say f dot write, or f dot, do we have a puts? Yeah, we have a puts. So f dot puts, I want to say this is the next line, and we will close this. Hmm. Something weird is happening here. Let's do that again. So f is file dot open, uh, f dot puts that dot close, and let's refresh this. Okay, so it's actually writing stuff out. Okay, so if you see, it has written this is the next line 2 times. Okay, so that's good. So that's how you can write to a file. Okay, now what we're going to say is we're going to say I'm going to have a folder called data. Okay, and I'm going to have a file called codes.txt inside of that. Okay, and what this code class is going to do here is this guy is going to, when I say save this code, this guy is going to save the body inside the code, inside this file. Okay, so all right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to say file dot open, right, and we're going to open the data codes.txt file, and we're going to open it in append mode. Okay, because we don't want to overwrite what is inside of it. Okay, so let's say this is the codes file, and we will write to the codes file by using codes file puts, and we will put the body inside of it. Okay, so we'll say body, this is the body. Okay, and that looks good, and we'll finally close the file. Okay, so something is causing errors in my console, so let me quickly debug that. Some messages, no tree. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly disable a few config init. So make, yeah, this is probably causing the issue. Okay, so I'm gonna go back to the code file, and still causing an issue. So let me be quick about this, and okay, so new. Okay, so let's get back to code.text, which is empty, and code.rb, which has some code, right? So let's try this from the console. Okay, so now Rails has a very neat thing called Rails console. Okay, so you can type Rails C, and that will open up the console. So here you can run arbitrary Ruby code. Okay, and it also gives you access to the Rails code. Okay, so now we have a class called code, which takes a body, right? So it says life finds a way. Okay, so we'll save this in Q, and if we say q.save, it should have, if we go to the codes file and refresh the data, you see it says life finds a way, right? And if I create a new code, right, if I create a new code, patience is awesome, and if I save that, and if I reload this file, alright, what's going on here? Okay, so for some reason my Vim is stuck. Okay, this is not normal. Okay, I'm gonna quickly find what's the Vim instance and kill it. Alright, 7807. Nope. So look at vim kill minus 97732. Okay. So something weird is happening in my vim, and that's alright. I'm gonna open up the code.txt file, and so here, if you see, it has added the second line, right? Patience is awesome. So we can keep doing this, right? And we can use this to save codes and read codes and display them. All right. So let's actually do this. So all right. So if you go back and look at how we did our initial hello world page, you'll see that we had a get, a route. So this is called a route. So your router is filled with routes. So a route is because it points how things should be sent, right? Should be routed. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, I'm going to have another get a route, but I'm going to say codes new. If you go to the URL codes new, it's going to send me to the codes controller, the new action. Okay. Now you may say we don't have a codes controller, right? So you're right, we don't. So let's create one. So I'm going to say codes controller.rb, and a controller is a class which has a name suffix of controller, okay, and it also inherits from application controller in our case, okay. And we're saying it should go to the new action, right? So here we'll say we have a function called new, and so here when we go to the coach new page, if you think about it, you should be greeted with a form which allows you to enter a code, right? So what we need to do to get that working is we need views page. I'm sorry. We need in the views folder we need a codes folder because that's the convention Rails follows, and new html.erb, right? So now if you open up this, I'll put a heading here called new code, and let's try it out. Okay, so if I go to the URL codes new, you'll see it says new code, right? So that's awesome. Now let's add a form. So I'll say form tag, and we'll give it a route. We'll say go to the codes URL, and we'll end it, and we'll add a text area tag here. Okay, so we'll say a text area tag called body. Okay, and let's refresh this. Segmentation fault. All right, so code new. All right, so codes. That's weird. So codes new.html erb. Let's recover that. Yeah. And so now you see we have a text area which allows us to enter our body, right? So we also need a button here called the submit button, right? So submit tag create code, right? Or we'll say save code in this instance. Okay, so we have that, and we'll put a line break here. Okay, so we have a nice place where we can save the code, right? So here I'm going to say grit is good, and I'm going to click on save code. And when I do that, you see we ran into an error. It says routing error, no route matches post codes. Okay, so this is something which comes up often when you're building Rails applications. And down below you also see that routes match in top priority from top to bottom, and these are all the routes that Rails knows about. Okay, and if you take a quick look at it, right, if you take a look at the routes file, you'll see there are two routes, right? one which goes to slash, which which if it gets slash goes to page welcome, and the other which if it if it receives a request for codes new, it goes to the codes new controller. So it looks like our routes are good. I mean, the routes which are listed are good, but we are missing a route. Here it says I'm trying to make a post request to this codes URL, but I don't find that route, is what Rails is saying. So what we need to do is we need to actually add a post route for codes, and we need to route it to, let's say, the codes controllers create method. Okay, so if we go to the codes controller, right, all right, we go to the codes controller. Wow, this is very bad. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna open this in codes. Okay, so this is another editor. So we'll open up the codes controller and we'll add a new action called create. Okay, and why create? Because we did that in the routes, right? In the routes, if you look at it, you see we have post codes should go to the codes create controller, right? So now we have the route set up and we also have the action set up. Let's see what happens. Okay, so now if I go back and submit the form, let's see what happens. So it actually has thrown an error, but we don't see it here. It's interesting. So I'm gonna refresh this and say test, save code, and a request was sent, and the response says it failed to load the response, or is it still pending? So there was an error here. Was there an error? Okay, so here if you look at the logs, and you should keep looking at the logs once in a while, whenever there is an error. So here it says no template found, rendering head no content. Okay, so what it means is it went here and there was no template found. Now let's see in our views if we have a template or a view for the code for the create. So we don't have a create.html, right? So that's the reason it's failing. So the usually the way to handle this is you need to redirect the user to the to a different page. Okay, so here we are redirecting the user to slash. So if we do that, let's reload this and say test and click on save code, and you see now we are on the home page, right? So what we should actually do here is we need to save the code, right? So to save the code, what we need to do from our IRB exercise, we know that we need to create a new code and call save on it. So we'll say code.new, and the body of the form is available in a variable called params. Okay, so this is how you actually get it. And now if I say code.save, it actually saves the code. Okay, so now let me go back to the new code and say have patience. Okay, and let's go back and open up our codes.txt file. Okay, so if I open up the codes.txt file, you'll see it has a line which says have patience. Let's actually add another code. Okay, life happens wherever. Okay, so here right, let me look for a small one. All right. So, uh, uh, sick of tea. That is like sick of breathing. Okay, that's a nice one. So now, if you see this reloaded and we have that saved, right? So so here, if you look at our code, and our code is actually all our code is in the actually it's in a couple of places. One is in the codes controller, and the other is in the uh, code RP file. Okay, so here you see data. So here you see um, in the create action, we're creating a new code and we are calling the save method. And the save method opens that file and puts the content of the code and closes it. Okay, so that's good. Now we also want to see all our codes, right? Because we are saving it, we are writing it, we want to read it too, right? So let's add another method to code called actually. So let's make this a class method. So I'll say all. Okay. Now here, what I want to do is I want to I want to uh, create all the I want to read all the codes here. Okay, that's what I want to do. So to do that, we can read the file, right? Read the file, which is a data codes.txt, and um, we need to take each line and strip out the new lines from it. So actually, let me. All right. So close others. All right. All right. So close to the right, and let's close that. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. Come on. All right. So we have this, right? And finally, what we want to do is we want to return a quote. Okay, so we'll say quote new x dot strip. Okay, we'll also strip the new lines. Okay, so if I reload the code here and say quote dot all, you'll see that now we have a list of quotes which was returned, right? So now we can take this list and render it. Okay, we also want a way to read the body. So we'll say I have a method called body which returns the body of the user and of the code, and we'll go back to the codes controller, and here actually we'll go back to the page controller, and here we'll say codes is code dot all. Okay, and if we try and open up the welcome HTML file, and um, we can put a for each loop, right? So I'll say okay, so less than percentile equal to uh, codes dot each to code, right? And what we want to do here is so let's say we want all the codes to um, be inside of divs. Okay, so we'll create a div, or let's create a block code here, right? So block code, and we'll put our code inside this. Okay, right. So code dot text. Okay, so that's good. Let's refresh this, and oh, so there's no method called text. We actually have a method called body. So let me refresh the page now, and awesome. Here you see we have all the codes listed, right? And if I create a new code, say save wisdom, okay, you see it has been added to the end, right? So we now have a way to add codes and read codes I did originally plan this episode to go this way, but you saw that uh, we can do stuff without using a database. Okay, but there are many pitfalls, right? For instance, let me go back and add a code with some new lines, right? Um, so here say patience and bravery are the same. Okay. Now, if you see what it has done is, since it has new lines and since our code application thinks every new line is a new code, it's printing out everything as a new separate code, right? So here you see save wisdom is another code, patience is one code, and bravery. So this, and there are many other pitfalls, right? For instance, if two guys are trying to write to the same file, then it's going to create problems and stuff like that. So if you have a good application, I mean, if you have a if you have a moderately complex application, you have to use a database. Okay, so in the next session, we'll see how to actually use the database and you know do the same, but using actual Rails code. Okay, so that's it for today. Um, we'll look at the next functionality in the later episodes. All right, so you guys have a great day. Bye.